For the past several decades, the church in America and the West has been sold a bill of goods. Or maybe I should say the church in the West has been trying to sell a bill of goods, but we don't realize it. Now, I'll just go ahead and tell you right now, I might be exaggerating just a little bit, but you'll understand the point as I get into it. Now, this bill of goods is not an untruth. It's not a lie. It is truth, but it's only half the truth. And you all know as well as I do that only half of the truth can sometimes be just about as deceiving as can a lie. And so what has happened, especially in the West, is that we have taken a truth and we so misplaced it and overemphasized it to the expense of the other side that it blinds us to the whole picture. So, God showed His love for us at the cross, right? The cross was about us, right? All right, so the mistake is when we think that the cross was all about us or only about us. Now, some of you may be thinking, who cares? It seems like a trivial point to be debating, right? Well, I intend to show you that it's anything but trivial. In fact, I think that this is probably right at home with the weak and puny and powerless condition of many churches that are in this country today. It's that serious. Several years ago, there was a popular Southern gospel song that said, "When He was on the cross, I was on His mind." Some of you probably remember that. Most of you probably don't, but I have nothing against that song, except that I don't really believe that I, Jeff Simpson, was on Jesus' mind when He was hanging on the cross. And I'm not sure that's exactly what the song was trying to say. The sentiment is really good, but I think there's something more important on Jesus' mind. That's not to say that there weren't any moments when He wasn't thinking about the billions of people who would be saved because of what He was doing. But I think there was something else that occupied His mind a lot more, and that was His Father. I believe that as Jesus was hanging there on the cross, that the thing that helped Him to get through that in so much agony was to just focus on His Father, even during that time when He could not perceive the Father's presence. Now, we know that there were at least a few moments that He was thinking about His mother, because He took care of her provisioning with John while He was hanging there. We know there were a few moments that He was thinking about the thief on one of the crosses that believed. But there were several hours there that Jesus was just hanging in complete agony. And I think that He was focusing on His Father. I think that He just held His Father in His mind's eye, and that was the thing that He used to help Him get through the suffering. Now, I'm going to show you a few scriptures that lead me to believe that. There are many Old Testament scriptures that are explained in the New Testament as being prophetic of Jesus, and in many of these it shows Jesus as putting all His hope in His Father, that He was putting His hope for vindication and for preservation and all that in His Father. One example of that is Psalm 16:10. It says, "For you will not abandon my soul to Sheol, nor will you allow your Holy One to undergo decay." And then in John 14:31, Jesus tells His disciples on the night before He's crucified, "But so that the world may know that I love the Father, I do exactly as the Father commanded me." Get up, let us go from here. A little bit later in Gethsemane, He went a little beyond them and fell on His face and prayed, saying, "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me, yet not as I will, but as you will." A little later, He went away again a second time and prayed, saying, "My Father, if this cannot pass away unless I drink it, your will be done. That last phrase, your will be done, could be translated, your will must be done. And then in John 18:11, after Peter had swung his sword and cut off the ear of one of the high priest's servants, Jesus said to Peter, put the sword into the sheath. The cup which the Father has given me, shall I not drink it? So in all of these cases, he's revealing that for him, for Jesus the man, and we got to realize that Jesus was a man as well as still being God. For Jesus the man, this whole thing became about his Father and the will of his Father. He was completely convinced that this was his Father's will. And that's one of the things that happened there in Gethsemane was, if there was any doubt before, it was put to rest. And Gethsemane gave him the strength to face the trials, the beatings, and the torture of crucifixion. You know, many people seem to think that Jesus dying on the cross was God's plan B. That plan A was what it was like in the garden before sin, you know, Adam and Eve and innocence and all that. And many people think that was God's plan A, and that would just go down and, you know, just stay like that throughout the centuries. But Adam and Eve messed that up, so God had to switch over to plan B. A lot of people think that way, but those people that do forget that the Bible clearly tells us that Jesus was crucified as a lamb slain before the foundation of the world. So before God ever created anything, the cross was already on the calendar. And I've tried to think to myself, you know, why would God do that? I mean, obviously, he planned that. So it was plan A all along. And so why would he do that? Why would he put himself in a position where he, quote, has to suffer in such a way? I have a little pea brain. And my little pea brain has a lot of difficulty grasping some of those things. So the only answer I can come up with is that there was something about God that was beautiful, magnificent, wonderful, amazing, awe-inspiring. It was something about him that he wanted to share. There was something about him that he wanted to reveal. And so if he's going to reveal this, then there has to be somebody to reveal it to, right? Okay, so why couldn't he have just created the angels and stopped there? Well, obviously, since that's not what he did, then that was not enough to reveal this wonderful something that he wanted to reveal. Well, what if he had created, you know, all of creation, the angels and humanity, but just kept sin from happening? You know, God could have done that. He could have prevented Satan from going into the garden tempting Eve, and it could have made it to where we would have never fallen, and everything would be rosy and great throughout all time and eternity. But apparently that wasn't enough in order for God to reveal this thing. So you know, God didn't have to create anything. He could have been perfectly happy having never created a thing, just in himself, in the fellowship of the Trinity, 3 in 1, and the love that was within him. He could have been perfectly happy without us, but he wanted to reveal something about himself. And in order for him to fully reveal that, Jesus had to die on a cross for sinners. As a side note, I disagree with the people who say that if he had prevented sin from coming into the picture, then we would all just be a bunch of robots. I disagree with that completely. Were Adam and Eve robots before they sinned? Obviously not. And so I don't see that at all. And I think that it's a way of perhaps trying to get out of the fact that it was God's intention for these things to happen. I need to set you up. I'm going to, as we lead up to Resurrection Sunday, I'm going to be going over 3 aspects of that special something that God wanted to reveal about himself. You know, I've been hinting around at that the whole time, that there was some special something God wanted to reveal about himself, and I'm going to share 3 different aspects of that, but I'm probably not going to get to any of those 3 today, because I need to set you up for the importance of all this. At the beginning of this message, I led you to believe there would be something life-changing that was going to be said today. I told you that the Western church had emphasized one side of truth to the detriment of another side, and if we could restore that balance, it would be life-changing even for us, and I fully believe that. So before anybody zones out, let me tell you why this is so vital. Everyone here, everyone in the world for that matter, is wired for something that we will call awe. We seek to find things that provoke us to awe. In fact, we spend nearly every free minute of our time seeking awe. Now, awe is a big word for something that only has 3 letters. And a lot of times people will take the word awe itself as being on kind of one end of scale, you know, like you can be impressed, and then you can be amazed, and then you could be, you know, awed. And I'm not intending to use the word that way. I'm intending to use that word to describe the whole scale. So when I say that people seek things that awe us, we could also say people seek things that impress us. Now, I don't know if you've thought about this or not, but a lot of people spend every free minute looking for something to impress them. And I think that's just because we're wired that way. We're wired that way. So we look for things that are impressive, and when we find them, we generally like to share that with somebody else. For example, there's a video on YouTube of a chainsaw that's powered by a V8 car engine. And it's so heavy, you know, that you can't hold it. It has to sit on this cart that you can kind of tilt back and forth, and big old blade on it, and it can go through a 3-foot log in less than 2 seconds. I mean, that is an amazing chainsaw. And so I've shown that video to a lot of you, at least once, maybe even 2 or 3 times, because I forget who I've shown it to, because it's impressive and I like it, and I'm a chainsaw guy, so I like that, and it's impressive. And so since I want to impress somebody else, and I show that so that they will all be, you know, I would suggest that videos on Facebook are good evidence that people spend a great deal of time looking for something to impress them. Nearly every video that people post is impressive in some way. It might be, you know, some kind of amazing musician. You've seen those, haven't you? Amazing musicians doing amazing stuff with their instruments. And it's even more amazing when the amazing musician's a kid, right? You know, you see videos of you know, 8-year-old kids, and they're doing things that a lot of professional musicians couldn't dream of being able to do. So there's that. There's amazing inventions. You know, have you ever watched a video of some, you know, I like the one where the jet skis there and the hose and the thing, and the guy can put it on and the water shoots him up into the air and he flies around. That's an amazing invention. Makes it something I'd really love to try sometime. Maybe natural occurrences like the Northern Lights or something of that nature. Or maybe it's amazing disasters, whether natural or man-made. You know, like a volcano erupting, or somebody driving like an idiot on snow and ice and rolling their vehicle 3 or 4 times, and somebody caught it on video, so they had to put it on YouTube. And of course, there are things on YouTube being put up these days that none of us want to see. There are videos that are amazingly funny. And there are some videos on Facebook that the only amazing thing about them is how stupid they are. But what do? We watch them and say, gosh, that was stupid. But nobody puts up a video of something that they think is completely boring. Let's say, for example, that some guy posts a video of his wife sleeping. Now, who's going to watch that? Well, actually, because we've been preconditioned, a lot of us might watch it for a little bit. Now, if this lady is snoring like a chainsaw with a V8 motor, now that would be impressive, right? And yes, I know for a fact that there's women that can snore just as every bit as good as a man can. Some of you are freezing up because you know you're guilty. No, I'm guilty too. But say this video's on YouTube, and this guy's got, his wife's in bed, she's covered up, she's sleeping, and so what do? Well, you start watching it. Why do you start watching it? Because you think in order for somebody to have put this on Facebook, something's going to happen, right? And so you watch it, and it goes for 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 5 seconds, nothing's happening, and you're starting to get a little impatient. And it goes on another, 6, 7, 8, 10 seconds, and by this time you're getting really antsy. And maybe you shut it off, but then after you shut it off, you thought, well, what if I'd waited just a little bit longer for the whatever it is to happen? So you turn it back on, and so it goes along, 15 seconds, still nothing happened, and the video ends and nothing's happening. What do you say? That was ridiculous. Why did I just waste 15 minutes of my life watching a video of this guy's wife sleeping in bed? Now, what you want to happen is you want for maybe like the cat to pounce on her and scare her to death, and she come screaming out of bed, crash into the lamp, and it goes down on the floor and breaks into 1,000 pieces. Now, if you saw that, you would go, whoa, that was awesome. Right? So, I'm going to say that Facebook videos are pretty good evidence of two things. One, people are looking for impressive things. And two, when they find something, they want to share it with others. Why would a person spend hundreds of dollars and drive hundreds of miles to see the Grand Canyon? It's very amazing. It's impressive. Or could we even say awe-inspiring? A guy told me once, a friend of mine said that he had been to the Grand Canyon, and it was nothing. It was just a big old pothole. Now, I don't know how anybody could possibly see the Grand Canyon and not be impressed. So I guess something was wrong with that dude. But do you think it would be possible that Christians in America are just not that impressed with God? We would hate to think it, but why don't Christians talk about God very much with their friends? Why do we find it hard to put down our selfish desires or to avoid temptation? Why do we yawn at the thought of going to church? It's not a matter of knowledge, because we know with our minds that God is full of amazing, wondrous glory, much more than we could ever know. But when was the last time that the holiness of God, and I mean just the holiness of God, when's the last time that drove you to your knees? And some of you may be saying, well, I've been driven to my knees lots of times, but what was it that drove you to your knees? Was it your needs? And I'm not saying anything wrong with that. My needs have driven me to my knees literally lots of times. But when's the last time that just an awareness of how great God is, how holy He is, how amazing He is, when's the last time that just drove you to your knees, literally on your knees or even on your face? I'm thinking that for a lot of people here and in this country, the answer to that would be, well, never. And for a few people, that might not even sound like something they would like to happen. But by all means, keep those crazy videos coming. Now, I know you're probably wondering, I asked you if that's ever happened to you. You're probably wondering if it ever happened to me, and the answer is yes. Now, before you start feeling too much guilt, I'm going to tell you that it's not all your fault. And I'm not just being Freud here. Part of the blame lies with me and with other pastors and teachers you've had in the past, and with your parents and with the whole church you grow up in and teachers and so forth. And, in the West, as our culture has become more and more individualistic and selfish, the Christian message has kind of followed suit. I mean, when we start thinking about how can I present Jesus in such a way that someone might be interested, might be responsive to that, then the first thing that we go to is, what can Jesus do for you? What can Jesus do for me? Now, is there anything wrong with that? No, there's not. It's just that it's one half of the truth to the neglect of a different side. And you have to agree with me that Western culture, and American and other countries on this side of the globe, we're very individualistic, we're very selfish, we're very pragmatic. And so, the only way we're going to get people to respond to the gospel is to show them what's in it for them, right? So that's what we try to do. We have so emphasized that we maybe have forgotten to try to tell the world how awesome God is. Most children who grow up in church are not taught the awe of God because their teachers don't have it either, and their teachers didn't have it either. And I know this firsthand because I grew up in church. Growing up in church, we learn how to behave, or some people do. We learn Bible stories, but somehow the awe factor doesn't always come through. We learn how to negotiate church. We learn things that are acceptable to say and to do and not to do, and we learn when we need to pay attention and when it doesn't matter so much. Right in the middle of the sermon, it doesn't, I need to be paying attention when it finishes so I'll know when to stand up, but right in the middle, not so important. We learn when to stand up and when to sit down and all these kind of things. And who is God in all of that? Well, God is that person whose responsibility it is to see to it that we have a good day. What is prayer? It is ringing for the butler to bring us another pillow and drink. I know that sounds awful, but isn't it often true? Now, before we heap any more guilt on you, there are a couple of other things that stand in the way of our sight of God. One is that God doesn't reveal himself the way we sometimes think we might like him to. Bill Maher wants Jesus to come down in the middle of the Super Bowl halftime show, if he's real. And sometimes we probably wish that Jesus would do a little bit stronger ourselves, even though we know that he's real. But he doesn't always do that. We can't see him, but we can see him through creation and through the Bible and by the aid of the Holy Spirit. We see him when we seek him. Now, if Bill drew a sketch of the Grand Canyon on a 2-inch square piece of paper, and that is all I knew of the Grand Canyon, I doubt seriously that would be enough to motivate me to drive hundreds of miles and spend hundreds of dollars to go see the Grand Canyon. And I wouldn't carry it around in my wallet and to show all to my friends, look at this, isn't this awesome? Now, if I had a bigger picture, say maybe something that I tore out of a magazine, full page, full color, glossy picture of the Grand Canyon, now that might be a little more motivating. I'd really like to go see that in person, right? And I might even show that to some of my friends and say, look at this. Doesn't this look like it's amazing? And they might say, well, yeah, I'd like to go see that myself. Some people wouldn't, but some people might. Of course, no photograph can ever prepare you to see the Grand Canyon in person. If you've been there, you know what I mean. I mean, the pictures are beautiful, and you can see the colors and all that kind of stuff, but for me personally, it was about the space. When you stand there at the edge and there's so much space in between you and the bottom and between you and the other side, that just can't be caught on film. And that's one of the aspects of it that made me so impressed. We were driving up, we were driving along, we were going to the North Rim, coming from the north, and we were driving on the road. There's lots of trees on that side, and it's where you just barely get glimpses. And so I was like halfway running off the road trying to look out the window, see through the trees as we're going along. And I got just a tiny little glimpse or two, and I said, I think it's big. Of course, when we got to the edge, I knew it was. But, nothing can prepare you for that. Now, if I can use that illustration to compare the way God reveals himself, then we might say that God starts off by revealing a sketch. And then something a little more like say a wallet photo. And then maybe something a little bigger, a 3x5. And then maybe an 8.5 by 11, and then a 11 by 17. And of course, none of those photographs even come close to capturing the full glory of God, right? I mean, even when we see him, I don't think that we'll get it all in his fullness, but it's going to be so much greater and more awe-inspiring than anything that we've ever seen before. We're bound to fall down on our faces before him in worship. We'll be driven to our knees, and we won't think anything about it. We won't care whether somebody's laughing at us for falling on our knees. So the more of God that we see in this life, the more we want. God has wired us to crave the awesome, the impressive. And so since he is the most awesome thing in existence, then we know that God has wired us to crave him. But sin messes that up. We yawn in his face, and then we go out and look for any other awesome thing we can find. Which is more awesome, God or the NBA slam dunk contest? The greatest gift that we can give to our kids, our students, if you're a teacher, the next generation, is the gift of the awe of God. We can only give that gift if we have it to give. I feel for our teachers on Wednesday night, our kids' teachers. Many of those kids were not raised in church. They have no idea how to behave. And some of those kids, a few of those kids, have some significant personal problems. And they all have an overabundance of energy. And they are often not very nice. They have no idea what's really going on. They must want to be here because many of them, nobody's making them come. But nobody's really following up with that. And so with all that difficulty, our kids' teachers have quite a job on their hands. And you think about it, a lot of those kids, the only thing they're going to learn about God or the Bible is what they learn right here. And so they've got somewhere around 75 minutes, one night a week for about 35 weeks of the year to teach those kids everything they're ever going to need to know about God and the Bible. Nothing big about that, right? Sound like a tough task. But I can assure you that even if we were able to get all of that information taught and learned, that it really wouldn't do any good if we're not communicating the awe of God. Because see, there are millions and millions of people out there in America today that have been taught things about the Bible, but they never learned the awe of God. And because they didn't catch the awe, they don't have any need of it. They don't feel like they have any need of it. So it's one of those things that's caught more than taught. And if you want to teach it, you have to have it. And so, we want to all pray for those who work with our kids. One of the reasons that they're doing it is because other people wouldn't. But they also have their own burden, their own sense of calling for that. And it is amazing how much one little brat can disrupt a class. But God's bigger than all that. Yeah, that's what I said. No. All right. Now, I told you I wasn't even going to get to the first thing, and so that's going to go off, but I really wanted to just make these kind of comments today because I believe that the awe of God is the thing that's missing in our lives. And, of course, like I said, you're only going to be in awe of God by what God reveals to you. So what that ought to do for us this morning is it ought to motivate our hearts to begin to seek Him with all of our mind and strength. That we would seek Him by reaching out to Him in prayer and in reading His Word and in meditation and in obeying His commandments as much as we know, and in seeking the filling and the speaking of the Holy Spirit. You know, a lot of people would say that if they have ever really actually been literally spoken to, and I don't mean audible voice, but I mean a voice clear in your head, and you know it's God speaking, you know what He's saying. I've had that a few times, and I treasure those memories so much, and I've told you a few stories about it. I may do that a little bit more in the coming weeks, but if we can get to the point where we're responding by seeking Him, to seek His glory, to seek His awe, to have our eyes and our hearts filled with His presence, nothing else in the entire world will make you more effective as a Christian than that. Not only will you enjoy your Christianity so much more, and not only will it be so much more important and meaningful to you, but if you've ever tried to say anything to somebody else, the awe of God in your life is going to make it effective. And if your presentation of the gospel is nothing more than a memorized outline, probably not going to be very effective. But if you have an outline with awe, it's not the outline that's the problem, it's the lack of awe in most of our minds and our hearts. So, we should find our way back to God. Usually when someone mentions coming back to God, he means coming back to living right. And people do come back to God and living right many times in their lives, but the reason they have to keep coming back and keep coming back and keep coming back is because they don't have the awe. So I'm asking this morning that God would grant us the awe. Lord, I pray that as we stand before you